All right, welcome on to Hollinger and Duncan. We have much to discuss this week, John, and we got to get back to our organization rankings, but and of course eliminate another team from the playoffs. It'll be oh so difficult to do that, I'm sure. Might even be a team that we don't discuss in this section of the organization rankings that is going to get
Yes.
eliminated from the playoffs. But there's something actually that came down earlier today. I wanted to get your thoughts on. The Atlanta Hawks have been fined under the player participation policy with
Hmm.
Trae Young in their game against Atlanta, which I actually did for the NBA strategy stream. It was an NBA Cup game. They
Hmm.
held him out with Achilles tendonitis. He was a late-ish scratch,
Hmm.
and they went through, and the NBA looked at it and said, no, actually, medically, we think he could have played and he should have played there. Now, ironically, they won that game because Dyson Daniels was amazing on the ball. They
Yeah.
probably lose that game if Trae Young plays. Their defense wouldn't have been as good. I don't think he would have played as well as Daniels, at least in that particular game. But what do you think of this? I mean, this is this the first instance? I think it is of a team saying, or the league saying, no, you can't actually. He was not actually injured enough to not play.
I'm trying to remember if this is the first instance of a game. I mean, this isn't the first fine, but I think the other ones involved injury reporting.
Right. Yeah. I,
Uh,
I think this is the first time they said, no, your injury was bullshit. The guy wasn't injured. Because that's a really hard thing to say. That
yeah.
no, he wasn't injured. In your our we disagree with your medical findings and the guy should have played. It's also kind
I
of
think
a a lower level type of
yeah.
situation here too.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a fine, so whatever. It's it's Tony Wrestler's money. But the part that's interesting to me is how much lifting you want could have to do. Because Trae Young has been dealing with Achilles tendonitis the whole first half of the year, and it's legitimately been a problem for him. I think it's one of the reasons why he's been struggling by his very high standard offensively in the first half of the year. On the other hand, he's played every other game. He played the back to back right after that Boston game. He played 37 minutes the game before this, and there were 2 days off on either side of this game. So it seems like the Hawks decided let's give him 5 days off, and then let's hopefully get him closer to 100%, and took sort of a calculated risk here.
Yeah, I mean, they probably, I would guess that they didn't think that this was going to happen yet. So its investigation, including review by an independent physician, determined the Hawks held Young out of a game that he could have played in. And he doesn't fall into these carve outs as far as being over 35 or having like a specific injury or something like that. I think it's 35, I
Mm-hmm.
want to say. Uh, yeah, so that's, I mean, and yeah, you know what? 82 games, you can get a guy 5 days off in a row who's got a
Yeah.
persistent tendonitis issue. Like that probably is good policy, honestly. I'm surprised that the league went here if that's really what it was, because it's like, yeah, he has this injury. Like we're trying to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's important context that it's like there are 2 games, 2 days on either side. But I guess this is maybe like a hey, take these NBA Cup games seriously.
Yeah, like the
Maybe
I
that's
think
what this is.
the league's what the league is saying is if you're going to DNP rest a guy, don't do it on national TV games and don't do it on our NBA Cup games. We gave you 2 days off before the game, so you wouldn't be playing on it back to back. So at least play your guys. So I sort of I see where they're coming from. Again, it's a fight. It's not like they suspended somebody or docked them draft picks or something. I mean, it's a fine, so whatever. But it's an interesting precedent going forward.
Yeah, I think so, particularly because again, like there is an actual injury here. Like I can't remember exactly what the reporting has been in other games, but you're around that team, you know that it has been an issue
Yeah,
for him, and he hasn't been playing that well. And yeah, I mean, at times you got to just like something like tendonitis, like the only cure for it is rest. Like, yeah, you technically could have played on that particular night, but just it's going to continue to degrade
yeah,
slowly and surely
yeah.
unless you get some rest.
Shout out to Brad Rowland who pointed out that one thing that didn't help the Hawks case was that he wasn't even listed on the injury report for the next game.
Yes. That
They could have in retrospect they should have listed him as questionable for that Washington game coming out of that.
Yeah, that's so. But play the game a little bit better. Well, and of course, this is a league that, particularly with this stuff, maybe not as much as last year because hey, it worked. They got their TV deal that they wanted, including for the NBA Cup with Amazon. So good job by the league there. I thought they would chill with this stuff a little bit more this year. I thought maybe even the 65 game rule would go away, but I think the league was actually pleased with the amount of participation they got until everyone got injured the second half of the year, of course.
Right?
Last year, there's just that little tidbit. But yeah, I think there's also, you make a good point about that injury report because a lot of it is just, again, about the perception of these sorts of things. Ratings are down a little bit in this early portion of the season as well. One other thing I want to talk about too here. Joel Embiid not playing again now, and he got swelling in his knee over the weekend, didn't play Friday. Now he's going to be out even longer. Didn't even practice today. I mean, this is. What's your reaction to that?
This is turning into a Hindenburg season for Philly. It's. I mean, what can you even say right now? Like, when does this get better? What does full strength even look like when he comes back and is theoretically playing? Like, is this just the new normal? That's what you have to really worry about if you're Philly.
Yeah, I think it was especially concerning that he clearly had kind of been taking it easy out there. And then at the end of that Miami game, the last quarter, he was like, fuck it, I'm going to actually try and drive. And then he plays it in the Memphis game 2 days later and actually has 35, like looks pretty decent. And then as soon as he actually like really started trying to score and be aggressive the way that we've seen Joel be, then he has to shut it down again. I mean, that's when you combine the possibility of him just not being good when he's out there and also just not even being out there to begin with, or when he tries to be good, then he can't be out there. I mean, that is just a really, really difficult thing to deal with.
It feels like a more exaggerated version of Kawhi almost, right? Like Kawhi can the last couple of years could stay on the floor, but when he had to ramp up the playoff intensity, then that like was overwhelming for him, right? And it seems like even regular season intensity for Embiid is a little overwhelming right now for his knee.
Well, and the problem too, I think, is that there wasn't anything acute that happened, right? It's just it started swelling. I mean, that's what, when you're just getting this swelling from kind of normal everyday stuff, and like, because that's just like, how do you avoid that happening? Like, okay, you shut it down, you try to strengthen it some again, but ultimately he's had surgeries on that meniscus. Like, it's probably getting to the point where you're just going to get swelling because he doesn't have enough cushioning in that knee at this point.
And then the hard part too is when you shut him down and rest him, then the guy deconditions. Like you're putting fingers in the dam everywhere at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, especially because he's kind of lost the weight too. Like, you don't necessarily. I mean, I think he could still lose more, but and take a little more of the pounding off that knee. And the physics of it is when you add an extra even 15, 20, 25 pounds for a guy of his size, or subtract it, like it has an exponential increase when you're jumping and particularly landing of the effects. So maybe he could lose even more weight, and that Tim Duncan style, and that could help him avoid this still. But you're just, when I saw that he was getting shut down again, that was sort of the tipping point to me where I'm just like, man, I think it's probably more likely than not that it's never going to happen for him again. I desperately hope to be wrong, but it's just like, it was bad enough that he couldn't get ready to start the season, but the fact that they like finally did all this shit to get him ready, and then 4 games later he's right back where he started again with the swelling. It's just really very, very concerning.
Yeah, and it's a shame because he was so awesome in the games he did play last year.
So let's get back to our organization rankings now. And of course, we went through our criteria a year ago, but just to re-summarize it, we are talking about who we would want running our favorite team, from the owner, basically everything from the owner down to the coach, medical staff, uh, analytics department, GM, of course, all that stuff. Who we would want running a random team in the NBA that we were a fan of over, probably call it a 5-10 year, probably 10 year time horizon. And we went through some of our criteria in greater detail before the start of the last podcast, if you haven't listened to that one yet, which is also available on the public feed. We both had the same top three: Boston, OKC, and Miami. I think it is my turn now to pick my highest ranked team among the rest of them. And I actually am going to go with the Golden State Warriors here.
Yes. So to review, I had the LA Clippers at 4, and I had
Oh,
Golden
yes,
State.
excuse me. Thank
I
you.
had Golden State as my next team. But go ahead to tell me why you have Golden State here.
Yeah, I mean, I really like what they've done in the Mike Dunleavy era. I think he's had two pretty darn good off seasons in a row within the capabilities of what they've been able to do. He built a better team and also saved a ton of money to get under not only the second apron but the first apron. I thought they navigated a very difficult situation with Klay Thompson correctly.
Yeah.
He ended up leaving, but quite frankly, they are better for it.
Yes.
Just not that Klay is even necessarily a bad player, but for this team, and particularly with him chasing the ghost of what he once was for this team, he wasn't necessarily a good fit anymore. I mean, they held the line on what they were willing to pay him, and maybe they would have brought him back, but he decided he wanted to be elsewhere, which I certainly understand. And then sadly, D'Anthony Melton got hurt, and that was part of the calculus with him, is that he might be hurt. That's why he was available at that price. But I think that was still a pretty good gamble. Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson, those guys have been really good for them. Their drafting has been solid, getting Pajemski and Trace Jackson Davis last year. So I like what they've done to continue to build around Steph Curry and Draymond Green. And then also, they are willing to spend. Like Joe Lacob is one of the few who's willing to do that at this point in time. So that's another big component of this. It's a place that people want to be. They've had a lot of stability, obviously, at coach as well. They've managed to keep Stephen Curry happy. How many superstars he's probably going to finish his career with this team. But I think that this is a group that if they were in a different situation, with what they've been able to find along the margins, trading for Lindy Waters, who's an NBA player, just getting him for basically nothing was solid. So I think overall, this is a group that is willing to spend, but has also proven that they can succeed at some of the less important less sexy, we should say, but still important aspects of team building.
When you see a team build a really awesome bench, there's a good chance their front office is doing a good job.
Yeah.
And so I think Dunleavy. So it's only been 2 years, so we can't give him some of the props that that some of these other people with longer resumes. But these have been 2 really good years, I think, for him. They've kept Draymond from being an outsized problem, right? I mean, he's having a really productive year for them again, right? I think in other team scenarios, it could have gone a different way. The coach hire, obviously, Kerr's been there forever and doing a great job. So, yeah, I think they have a great case for being in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, what would be your argument against why they shouldn't be there?
Well, short tenure for this particular front office. I would say, I mean, how much do you want to hold that Jordan Poole contract against them? It's some of this. It's a lot of the same people, right?
Yeah.
And I like late in the dynasty, I do think maybe they lost their way a little bit. But you could argue that they shouldn't have picked Kuminga, that there weren't 2 other guys they could have maybe picked. But it's not like that's a horrible pick or anything.
No.
I'm trying to think what else is out there. I think maybe that GP trade. I mean, getting off of Wiseman, they waited too long, but like finally getting off of him obviously was the right move. Um, Turning those picks into GP, I don't know. That might have been a little too much romance with the past. We'll still see how that plays out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't quite been the same since then, so I definitely understand that aspect. Yeah, that was an amazing. I mean, I guess you could say like I'm not like I don't feel that any of these other organizations are like that much better than them. I think probably Denver would have an argument for being higher.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I know that their brand has been sullied a little bit lately, and that they're not willing to spend that well. But this is still the bones of a group. No Tim Conley anymore. That built a championship contender pretty much from scratch. So that certainly deserves some acknowledgement. But yeah, I mean, there's nobody that I feel like is particularly bulletproof, and I don't feel that way about Golden State either. But I think it just there's basically almost nothing that they've done in the Mike Dunleavy era that I haven't liked. So I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it. And you combine that with an organization that has a good culture and has won over a period of time. I think they've managed to deal with the difficulties of certain of their players, while also still maintaining a winning group. So maybe this is prisoner of the moment a little bit. That they've had this nice start to the season, and maybe they drop off and they end up kind of just being more in the play-in mix. So this kind of assumes that they're going to maintain this performance that they've had this season. But even if they don't, I think the reason they don't is probably because their stars aren't going to be at like the absolute highest level. You can't really do much about that. They've done everything they can to surround those guys, and they also maybe could make a move in the trade market. Like that's the other thing you might point to, is just that they haven't been able to make the big trade move to supplement this group. But maybe also they deserve credit for not making that move, because it would have been a bad one.
Yeah, or a dramatic overpay. Yeah.
Who else is in this group for you?
Memphis Grizzlies. I think that it's a similar thing where they've built a really deep team for the second time, and they've had it's a little longer tenure there now for Zach, and there's been some mistakes along the way, but I think still you look at the overall track record, it's pretty strong, and they have another good team this year, even without having a mega superstar. We'll see, John Morant physically, how much he can play and what level he's able to get to this year. You could argue they could have handled the jaw stuff better, I would say, right? Over the last 2 years. So that's probably one red flag. They don't, compared to Golden State, you wouldn't, they haven't proven that they have that same willingness to spend. When you talk about going into the tax and second apron or whatever for an elite team, they haven't really been put in that situation as much.
Yeah, well, but maybe not retaining Melton and Anderson.
Yeah, I think trading Melton to get for the David Roddy pick, I think was clearly terrible.
I mean that
was terrible.
That's a pretty rough move for an organization you're saying is in the top six. I gotta say. That's a little tough.
Slow-Mo was a different situation. He was a free agent. He was behind Jaren. So they the other thing you would say is like the Zaire Williams pick, right?
Yeah, and particularly given that they traded up from 17 to 10 and picked a much worse player than New Orleans picked at 17. That's pretty rough.
Although they went from Valanciunas to Steven Adams in that trade too, so they did get something out of that.
Although I will say that was perceived as downgrading at the time. Like they deserve credit for. I don't know if they would have thought it was an upgrade or not, but they deserve credit for identifying Adams as someone who could really help John Morant and give them a style that was really hard to play against. But also, I don't like that they in theory at the time were downgrading at center and taking on money to move up from 17 to 10. Like it wasn't like anyone at the time thought that they were getting the better player. Everyone thought Valanciunas was a better player at that time, including me. I was wrong about that. But that when you look at the value of that trade, one of the more fascinating in NBA history, actually, because of all the kind of moving parts in one way or another.
Yeah. Where they've really done their best work is on the margins, second round picks and scrap heap guys. You look at Pippen and Huff this year. You look at Jalen Wells, Vince Williams, Gigi Jackson being second rounders, Desmond Bain with the 30th pick. That's really been their best stuff. Santi Aldama was 29, I think, right?
30th, I believe.
Oh, he was 30 also? Okay.
I think so. Yeah, obviously Bain is another one there too. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong on that. I'll double check it in a second. But yeah, that's they have found a lot of guys. No, that is definitely true. And they made yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I take it they were not your number 6. Or
no,
your number
they
5
weren't.
for that matter. I guess we're still
no, they weren't. I mean, yeah, I would say, I'm trying to figure out who I want to have. Here are some of the teams that I have in this category. I have the Houston Rockets in this category. Cleveland has been really, really good. There's a lot of teams actually kind of that I feel have arguments to be in this group. And I'm not even sure that Golden State is a tier above them. And you have to give a lot of credit for the New York Knicks and what they've built, even if there is the Dolan asshole factor to consider, which can hinder them at times. Like, I still think Denver deserves to be in that category. I think the Dallas Mavericks have done a really good job as well. Orlando is a team that I don't necessarily fully agree with their overall philosophy, but they've done a good job of building up. The Vucevic and Gordon trades were good trades for them. Philly still has Daryl Morey, who's someone that I have immense respect for. And if their season had just started better, like everyone said Philly had the best offseason this year. Like, it hasn't gone well, but I don't think that's Daryl Morey's fault necessarily. Like, he had the fortitude to play hardball with Harden and deal him in a trade that I thought was great for them. And so there's, all these teams I think you can make arguments for, but I would have Memphis kind of more towards the bottom of that group.
Okay.
Maybe the caveat that, and I do think the cultural thing with Ja too, and that they're kind of just rising out of that now. Their medical stuff hasn't been that great either. So I think they maybe we'll be talking about that more at the end of the year, but all of these are kind of eye of the beholders right now, I would say.
Who's your next team though? If you have to choose.
That's I know. That was my way of saying I don't fucking know.
I found this section really hard.
No, I think so. And I think there we talk a lot about the coaching situation getting a lot better. I think that, your top half of the league in terms of organizations, like, there's not a lot to quibble with. Even Utah probably deserves to be in this discussion, although they've kind of, they seem to be treading water in a pretty deep area right now. But I think I still got to go with the Denver Nuggets. Like, I realize that they lost KCP and that they kind of cheaped out. I don't know that KCP is actually playing that well this year. I don't know that he would have been a panacea. Also getting Dario Saric was not looking too amazing, giving out some player options. But last off season, like, if we did this last year, they were easily in the top 5. I think they deserve to be in the top 5. And so I can't downgrade them that much. And even if you want to criticize their strategy, like, they've gotten a number of awesome rotation players drafting 20 or below over the last 3 years. Peyton Watson, Christian Braun, even Strother looks like he can be in a rotation. Like, they whiffed on Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson, but going 3 for 5 on NBA rotation players drafting 20 or below is pretty good. Sadly we're not going to get a chance to see Deron Holmes because of the torn Achilles this year, but I know he's someone that people liked as well. So they're continuing to have this pipeline going into this group, and of course, they deserve a lot of credit with the stability that they've created there with Michael Malone. And this is still largely, I'd say, an organization that still gets some credit for Jokic and developing him, and Jamal Murray. I guess I'll leave it to you, the counterpoint on some of their why you don't have them there. I realize there are a few arguments you can make.
When was the last time these guys signed a good contract?
Nikola Jokic signed a supermax.
Yes, they gave Nikola Jokic the absolute most they could give him. Yes. They also did that with two other guys, unfortunately.
The first Aaron Gordon extension, I think, was pretty good for them. But yeah, the Porter Jr., I mean, the Jamal Murray deal is looking absolutely atrocious. Like, there's no reason, particularly for a guy to
capitulate and give that.
Yeah, for a guy who A, has like chronic knee issues, B, looked terrible over the summer, and C, has often been criticized for not being in the best shape. Like, that's it. I just don't think there was that much like that was one where you had they kind of, I think, made the decision of like, look, we're not going anywhere unless Jamal Murray is going to be a great player. Like, we're not going to trade him. We can't get another player with his potential anyway, so we might as well just pay him, because what does it matter, right? Like, he's either going to be good or he's not, and so why create the potential for discord?
I just think when you're dealing with aprons and you don't really want to pay tax, like, you have to manage that ahead. You have to think about that. They did the same thing with Porter, and Porter was a guy who was radioactive to a lot of other teams because of all his medical stuff when he was in the draft. So that one is just as big a mystery.
Yeah, I mean, that was one where giving him the max based on his performance, and I would say even his upside, just for the type of player that he is, was dubious, even if he didn't have the injury history based on what he'd done so far. No, but don't worry, they made the final year only $12 million out of $39 million guaranteed unless they won an NBA championship, so it's fine. Well, I mean, I guess they figured they'd be happy to pay that if they won a championship, but actually they're not going to be happy to pay it.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
It turns out.
Exactly.
Because, like, I mean, I'm not going to say that. They didn't win in spite of him as a player. He was good, but they won in spite of that contract, I would say.
Yes. And then you get into these other contracts, the Reggie Jackson deal, the Dario Saric, Zeke Naji.
Yeah.
Like, you have to hit on these contracts if you're set up the way they are, and they've just whiffed over and over again. So really, the Christian Brown pick has turned out great. Betting on him to replace KCP, I think they're winning that bet. And
now they might be losing the bet of who's going to replace Christian Brown.
That has been that has been more the issue, that they're counting on these other late draft picks to play important minutes on a championship contender, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, again, I just have a lot of respect for what they've accomplished.
I give them a lot of points for player development, which we haven't talked enough about.
No,
very good at that.
Yeah, although I guess to be fair, like and I think like finding guys in the draft is really good, but yeah, you know what? I do think if Daryl Morey were their GM, would they now Daryl kind of skips on the team chemistry and culture aspects some too, which they've done a pretty good job of. That it helps to have a superstar like Nikola Jokic instead of a superstar like James Harden or Joel Embiid, to be sure. With that. But yeah, I do think now that they're contenders and some of the free agent signings and stuff like that, they haven't. One thing they also haven't succeeded with, kind of along those lines, is like finding cheap veterans who can help. Right, like who is their best free agent acquisition kind of at the lower end has been like Justin Holiday or something.
Right.
Maybe I'm forgetting someone, but
no, I mean Bruce Brown, the championship season.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yes, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, that was obviously a big coup. Yeah, and I do think it'd be nice if they had a little more shooting as well. But Jokic, certainly in the regular season at least, can make up for that. They're still a great offense, even though they have no shooting right now around Jokic. So, all right, I'm willing to. I kind of, when you said I had to pick a team, like I really wanted to kind of talk through these and then kind of give my final ranking. So yeah, I'm not sure based on what we really talked about here that I would have Denver in this range. Who is your next team?
My next team, despite the fact that everyone is dunking on them right now, is Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I think tremendous execution of an offseason plan, right? For a team that is in win now mode. And you knew that there was going to be some some downside with this strategy. And the one thing you would question about Philadelphia's offseason is actually the extension for Joel Embiid. Right? Because how much did they know about his knee condition when they gave him that extension? So that's the only one.
But that's another one where you're just like, if it doesn't work out with him, you're completely fucked anyway. So what does it matter, right? Like if Joel Embiid isn't going to be good, it doesn't matter that you're paying Joel Embiid all this money in some ways, right? Like it's because it's just you're not a contender and you just have to rebuild. So why not just like try to capture the upside for him, I guess, of like him actually being good, and you just like you have to just continue on and just assume that he's going to be good until he's just proven that he's never going to be. Which,
right.
Like we talked about, we might be getting close to that point.
Should they trade Paul George?
I got asked about that in my chat on Dunked on Prime yesterday, of just like how I would handle things as Philly, and my answer was that I'd kind of see how Joel is looking. If he could put together a month of playing reasonably well at some point before the deadline, I would continue to try to supplement this group. McCain's emergence means they don't need that much in the backcourt, so I try to get a 4 who can shoot with some athleticism and who can rebound a little bit to put next to Embiid, and then move Caleb Martin to the bench, and then, but yeah, if Joel is looking like he is done or he can't put together a stretch before the deadline, I would absolutely investigate getting what I could for Paul George and just kind of consider moving into a new era, or at least, hey, maybe if Joel is healthy next year, we'll try to reload around him a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also depends on how well George plays too. But I think hopefully he is a ticking time bomb in terms of that contract, because all the value is going to come this year, and maybe a team would want him still.
Yeah, see, I thought of that because that was somebody was arguing to me that the Clippers should have re-signed Paul George just to trade him later. And I think that would have been
I can't remember who that was.
A very high. I'm sorry. Were you saying that in our pod last week? I was in LA for 3 days, so I was just assuming someone told me out there. It's all running.
No, I mean, I still stand by that argument. I don't feel any differently about it a week later. He hasn't even played during that time.
But so, which would have been a high wire move, but I mean, now that you're Philly, you're sort of in that exact same spot where it's like, well, if we're not going anywhere, let's see what we can get here.
I mean, they also don't have the Clippers also don't have their pick for the next 4 years. So like, why not just like try to be a decent team and have somebody who can draw fans into the Intuit Dome that nobody is going to right now, apparently, because like. And maybe you could trade him, maybe you can't. But to me, I don't see like some big path of like what they're going to do 2 years from now that's going to be so awesome. And I also thought it was just dumb to like, oh, we're willing to give you 3 years, but not 4. Like that, I don't understand the tipping point there. Like, if you're willing to do the 3 years, just do the 4th one. Like, it's either going to be bad or it's not, right? Like, so. Yeah.
But we digress. The Sixers
we do indeed.
They nailed the Maxey and McCain picks, so give them points for that. And masterfully, I think, got themselves out of 2 bad situations. First of all, trading Ben Simmons and getting freaking anything, right? It was like a gigantic win, right? Like that's
now you could argue that they maybe should have gone for some younger talent instead of going for James Harden in that deal. But they also had Joel Embiid at that time. Harden was certainly the best individual player who was available. They felt like they could maybe win a championship with that group. So I understand why they went that way. In retrospect, though, if they could have gotten like Tyrese Halliburton, they would have been better off doing that. But that's water under the bridge. It was still a very, very good trade.
Harden might still be better than Halliburton right now. The way this year's been going.
No.
This version of Halliburton that we've seen this year.
James Harden is getting all this credit. He's just like a usage hog who the Clippers are winning because of their defense. Like anybody could be doing what he's doing to shoot 45% from 2 or whatever he's shooting. Like that's like he's just like out there soaking up possessions right now as a middle reliever.
And the other trade I want to get to though was then trading Harden to the Clippers, right?
Surely. Yeah, that was
And
a masterstroke.
and getting draft capital for that. So they're in a rough spot now. Like if Embiid goes back to playing at MVP level, then everything's fine, right? But if not, then they're going to suck.
Well, how much blame do you put on them for the fact that it's always fucking something with these guys?
Uh, I mean, that's the critique you'll hear about Philly and about kind of the Maury tree is that they worry a lot about the big picture stuff of getting the stars and everything, and less about those kind of day-to-day details.
Yeah, I mean, even stuff like Joel Embiid is like it's at the point with their culture where Joel Embiid is late for everything, and they don't like your 31-year-old star is like allowed to do this, like that he's been allowed to sort of like uh I mean that is very poisonous to your culture. Like I don't know that that's like it can
I
be
mean,
completely discounted in the fact that they've started so poorly.
and I mean, yeah, I mean, it's hard because I mean, we've talked about this before that Brooklyn basically did the same thing, right? They traded their culture for talent, and I think everyone in the league would do that, and yet it it really hurt them when they brought Kyrie in, especially, and it kind of just chipped away at everything they had done on the culture side because now it was just these guys are running
Yeah.
the show, sort
But
of.
well, you know what else chipped away with anything on the culture side was when the GM that Adam Silver handpicked to succeed Sam Hinkie like used anonymous Twitter accounts to criticize the team's star. I mean, that still is under the Josh Harris regime. Like he is the owner. I think he's willing to spend.
Yeah.
I kind of put it more as like Daryl is the lead guy there. Harris has other ventures. He hasn't been as involved anymore. Maybe he was too. Like the fact that he couldn't kind of like reach a détente with Sam Hinkie to just like keep a guy who is clearly talented, but maybe needed to just have some rough edges sanded off, and instead that they just brought in fucking Jerry Colangelo and Brian Colangelo above him.
Yeah.
I mean, that was we're talking about 8-9 years ago now, but that still was just terrible.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what one of the things with Philly is like that franchise is incapable of having a normal season.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I do think that some of it is just the individuals who are there, but some of it is just the lack of accountability for those individuals. But yeah, I mean, if you go back to our standard, like I still think Gerald Morey is like easily a top 5 GM in basketball. He's someone that I would want running my
Yeah.
random team.
Yes.
I think he brings in good people below him in the organization as well. So even if you're not setting a great culture, necessarily, you're also like finding really good players all the time in the draft and along the margin. So yeah, I mean, it's so when Philly just has all this bullshit going on, it's really hard to rank them highly, but maybe I just have to grit my teeth and do it anyway.
Who's your next team?
Oh, yeah. Again, I mean, let's just kind of talk through, and I'll give my final ranking at the end. Do the Cleveland Cavaliers deserve to be higher here
They
than we've talked about them in the past?
they were my next team. I think they took a risk with the Mitchell trade that has absolutely worked out. I think they did a great job. Nobody talks about this. Of they just inserted themselves into a trade between Houston and Brooklyn and walked away with Jared Allen. Right? Like that was incredible. And then they extended him for twice on good terms. The Garland pick has worked out, right?
Yeah, particularly when they already had Sexton, right? Like Sexton, they're in those dark days, they were pushing Sexton for could he be all rookie first team? They're sending out press packets for that. But then to say, hey, you know what? Darius Garland's the best player available. We're going to draft him. He turned out to be way better than Colin Sexton. So That was absolutely the right move. They deserve a ton of credit for that. I think that is a very important lesson in drafting, that don't be afraid to draft over the top of a guy, unless it's just, like Luka Doncic or something.
Yeah. And then I think they've done a good job filling out that roster now. When you look at getting Strus, who hasn't played this year, but he's been a good player at a position of need. Getting Sam Merrill off the scrap heap. Getting Ty Jerome, Wahoo Wah.
Yeah,
Even
Dean Wade, like
Dean
they've. I
Wade.
mean,
Yeah.
the only guy who you might say hasn't worked out amazingly well has been Niang, but even he gives them something in the regular season. Like, that wasn't an awful deal. You just wish he was shooting a little better.
Yeah. Yeah, he hasn't been great. The Levert deal even is looking bad. Like, Karis Levert's been really good this year. And that was the
Yeah.
one we probably questioned the most. The extension for Mobley, like it looks fine now. You wonder if they could have done better on that. That would probably be the, if you're going to start with gripes, and then obviously ownership, you're always going to have questions there.
Yeah, I didn't love the trade for Levert in the beginning. I thought, he's kind of. I think if you had signed him in free agency to the deals that he's been on with them, that would be one thing. But to also give up a pick for the right to get him is not great. But yeah, largely, and then also probably the biggest thing we should talk about is that they moved on from JB Bickerstaff and brought in Kenny Atkinson, which looks like a complete home run at the moment.
Yeah, that's worked out well for that. So I projected to be Cleveland to be much better this year, no matter what, because they just had a ton of injuries last year. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, obviously 17-1 though. I mean, like, how can you argue with that? And I had people from Brooklyn telling me, like, no, Kenny's really good. Watch, like, they're going to be really good. I was like, oh, okay. So
Well, and he also, I mean, consider where he was working with. I think it was he worked with Ty Lue first, and then he was in Golden State as well, right? So that was
yeah,
it's pretty good training for a guy that I already thought was a pretty good coach. So yeah, I mean, what is your, the Okoro pick was not amazing, but that was not a great draft. I probably would have gone with him there too. He at least has become, a rotation guy. Like the Jalen Tyson pick, he wasn't someone who was like getting a ton of buzz there. Like, that's looking pretty decent
yep.
as well. So yeah, I mean, and going Mobley at 3, I don't know that was necessarily like that obvious. I think most people had him there though. So Craig Porter Jr. is another guy that they found off the scrap heap is good.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, when you have, I mean, that's like they have that big four and all of those guys except for maybe Mobley were guys that like they had to make a good decision on. Maybe the alternative of like what would Lauri Markkanen have been on this team is a fascinating one, but he just nobody saw coming what he's been in Utah. So and then it's looking like the draft picks they gave up in the Mitchell deal are not really going to matter. So
They've become good enough that the draft picks they owe will not matter. Yes, that's what it looks like. They owe, because they owe a pick this year, which is going to be 30, right, or whatever, and then in 27 and 29, and then it's swaps in 26 and 28.
Yeah, and so even if you do end up giving up a high pick in 29, like you got all this time done, and they got Donovan Mitchell to extend too. We didn't mention that aspect. I think that was the big reason everyone was worried. It was like, oh, are they going to have to retrade him in 2 years? Now, hopefully, he didn't extend because his knee is fucked, but he's looked fine this year, I would say overall. So yeah, I mean they're doing a really good job. And then we do know at least that Dan Gilbert will spend, and him taking a step back, even though it wasn't great for him. The reason for it was obviously, not great for him personally. I think that probably has helped the organization.
Yeah, and they will need to probably be a tax team, if not a second apron team, to kind of keep this together in the out years. This year they could probably skate under with a trade at the deadline, but you look at 26, 27. I mean, Ty Jerome's going to need a max.
Yeah, will they have bird rights on him? Is he a free agent after this year?
Early bird free agent, yes.
Ooh. Actually, it should also be said before we move on from there was some insinuation that Dan Gilbert in the end put his thumb on the scale for Kenny Atkinson over James Borrego, but it would seem actually that was the correct decision.
Yeah. Huh. I don't.
We correct me if I'm wrong here, but I thought there was something that came out from there. It's like there was a meeting. I think what it was, and again, this is going from memory. Chris Fedor talked about this, that they it looked like it might be Borrego, and then there was a meeting that happened with Dan Gilbert, then they hired Kenny Atkinson.
Oh.
So I think that was.
I wonder what happened in the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, apologies if my memory is not serving here. I didn't research the specific aspect before we started, so that's my best recollection of what happened. Someone can correct me, or I'll look it up after this. But all right, who's your next team to talk about here?
My next team is the Dallas Mavericks, who I think under Nico Harrison have just done a really solid job. And I saw them come into Atlanta last night, missing Luka, missing two other guys on a back-to-back, and still took care of business. I think Najee Marshall was a great signing. I think Derek Lively was an inspired draft pick. I think getting Jaden Hardy as a second rounder has turned out to help them. I didn't see Grimes last night, but I think he'll help them this year.
That was a brilliant move to get someone who is going to help them more than Tim Hardaway Jr., who makes way less money, that they have restricted rights on, and to do it for net like a couple of seconds. Maybe it was 3 total. I can't remember the nature of those exactly. But that was an absolutely brilliant move.
And then the trades last year for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, which basically, spiked them on their way to their finals run. So I think overall, you got to say they've done.
Well,
a really
and Kyrie,
nice job there.
what about? I mean, the Kyrie trade, was brilliant.
Exactly.
Now they did start their tenure by fucking up the Brunson situation.
Yes.
And you would have loved to be in a situation where you just had Jalen Brunson on what would have been a great contract with Luka. I do think Kyrie is a better fit with Luka, but obviously they also had to give up a fair amount to get him. So if you could have had Brunson and Luka and then also been armed with like your full draft going forward, that could have been very powerful. So that was definitely an own goal. But I think probably getting Mark Cuban out of there with ownership, we'll see what their willingness to spend is going to be. It's made sense for them to stay below the first apron these last couple of years so that they could make moves. We'll also see how the Clay thing turns out. Like, that's been kind of up and down, but
yeah,
as long as they don't feel obligated to play him at the end of games when he's not playing well, I think he can, he still is going to help them. So it doesn't seem like they do feel that obligation, at least reading the tea leaves early. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, most of their moves have been pretty darn good, and I kind of give organizations a little bit of extra credit when they do something that I didn't necessarily see coming as being really good. Like I would say the PJ and Gafford trade would fall into that category. I don't think either of us liked that, and it turned out to actually be really solid.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially PJ.
And Gafford too, honestly, like this idea of having just 2 really good rim protectors that you can play, and neither of them has to play more than 28 minutes a game, is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think he cost a little bit less than PJ was the other piece of my logic there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that was like you know what? I should be able to remember exactly what it was. I think that was like a lower end 2024 pick is what it ended up being rotted through OKC in some Byzantine manner.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, certainly, I was sort of like, all right, you're like, what are they really adding with this guy? Don't they have Lively already? But I think that was the idea of just, we got Luka Doncic here, getting Luka Doncic a lob threat at all times, one of the best lob passers ever, that they're just going to dunk teams into oblivion and then protect the rim on the other end. The Jason Kidd hire, also just another thing that I completely disagreed with that has turned out well. And then, so I think other than the Brunson thing, Nico Harrison has been exactly what he was supposed to be. Well, yes. Yes, that wasn't too good. But knows Kyrie. He was able to use that relationship. Knew Jason Kidd he was able to, sometimes just knowing a person well, like it can lead you astray, but it also can lead you to find someone that everyone else has sort of given up on, and certainly that was the case with Kyrie.
Yes. Yeah. Because I think that, I mean, you look at it, getting Kyrie for what they had to pay, and at the time everyone was like, yeah, I don't know. And now it's like, oh yeah, the risk reward on that was awesome. Right? Like, and so it helps that, Kyrie, it seems like he's matured and whatever, and, is in a better place now. But so that one has turned out really, really well.
Yeah. So again, I'll kind of give my final ranking as we go through this group. I mean, I think you have to have respect for what the Knicks have done to put them in this group, even if, of course, they were a joke for so long. Even if James Dolan remains a first-class asshole, that, like, I mean, they just have built a really, really good team out of absolutely nothing. Again, this is one where they've done it in ways that I wouldn't necessarily have anticipated were going to work out. Like the Thibodeau hire, I was kind of like, all right, didn't he flame out at Minnesota and like he's going to run everyone into the ground? And like, no, actually, he's been, as particularly in the early years, exactly what this team needed. Uh, Obviously, getting Brunson was a complete coup. I mean, that was the basis for everything. Getting Randall as well. I think that actually might have been the previous regime. I want to say, yeah, that was the Steve Mills regime still.
Yep.
So you can't give this group as much credit for that. That was after they struck out. But he was the basis of some of their initial teams, along with Thibodeau. And the Hartenstein signing was amazing. It was too good of a contract that they couldn't.
Exactly.
That was the one problem, that they couldn't afford to re-sign him. That's, man, think of all the dominoes that happened because they couldn't afford to re-sign him.
Yeah.
And
the
McBride,
McBride and Quickly picks, like they've had some good drafts.
Every year they managed to get some guy in the draft, and that's really
Mitchell Robinson. Was that the previous regime?
I think he was like 18. I think that was the previous group.
Trading for Hart.
Yeah, I mean their trades have all really. I mean Hart, the DiVincenzo signing also was really good.
For the mid-level. Yeah, they've done great stuff in like the mid-level range.
Yeah.
Now this last year, I think. I don't know if tarnished is the right word, but makes you question the ranking a little bit, just in terms of, I think they clearly overpaid for Mikal Bridges. The Towns trade is really interesting. We'll see.
Yeah, I watched them put up a $145 on Denver without breaking a sweat last night. So I'm a little bit biased.
I watched
because I called that game for the strategy stream.
I watched them lose to Utah 2 days before that. Okay.
Yeah.
They went on a 17-0 run and still lost by 18 to Utah.
Yeah.
Like that was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Utah shut the lights out in that game too, but so we'll see where they end up. I mean, it's not like Randall and DiVincenzo have been killing it in Minnesota. If it were up to me, I probably would have just stood pat there. The Bridges trade, yeah, I mean, particularly for what he's been so far this year, like I think if the concept of Mikal Bridges that they traded for would have been totally worth it, but he hasn't been that on either end, frankly. Like his shot looks kind of fucked right now. He's still shooting at least, but I think he's kind of trying to shoot himself out of it at the moment, and he hasn't had the same impact on defense. I mean, the Anunoby trade I thought was a complete home run, even having to pay him the $40 million. Like he's just like whenever he's been out there, they've just been really, really good.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they did have to pay him probably more than you would have loved, but then this is also a place like where they have kind of leveraged their relationships with Tom Thibodeau and Rick Brunson, and now Jalen Brunson signs this incredibly below market extension that has enabled them to do all this other stuff. Like, but they built a team that has like the second or third most talent in the East out of just nothing.
Yeah. Out of ashes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the one top pick that they had was Barrett, who predated this regime. They ended up trading him for Anunoby, but like they managed to like just create an all-star with a free agent signing like that. That's just incredible work there. I mean, and everybody, like pretty much every signing that they've made has worked out great,
They will
and
also
every
end
and
up
just about every draft pick too.
and they will also end up with the rights to every single international player. Within about 5 years, I think they'll have all of them. Every single one.
Yeah. And 2/3 of them will be Lithuanian, I think.
Yeah, yeah. They have 14 right now. My latest count. That might not be fully updated, including Wang Jaelin, who we drafted with the Grizzlies in 2016.
So all right, I think we'll move to eliminating a team from the playoffs here. I think this is a
Sure.
reasonable stopping point, although I do think that Utah, Orlando, Houston, and Brooklyn also have arguments for being in this group. And I mean, there are a lot of organizations that are pretty decent too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Indiana has historically been pretty good. I haven't loved what they've done in the last year or so necessarily. The Siakam trade was okay. You know, Minnesota is someone we could talk
Yep.
about too. But so I guess I would say here, you know, we'll continue this exercise. I might move things around, but yeah, you convinced me to move Denver down a little bit. You know, I still would have Philly kind of. I'll eventually put out my full rankings. I still would have Philly kind of at the top of this group.
All right.
Clippers, I totally disagreed on you having them as high as you did. I think I would put the Clippers for me right now below any of the teams we've talked about today.
Okay. Okay.
You know, Memphis is one I probably didn't give enough credit to. Like what they've done this year has been really good. But I can't put them as high as like a Dallas or Philly. Probably would still have to have them a little bit below Denver, and Cleveland I think would be, you know, above Denver or maybe even Memphis as well. But it's just been a pretty fascinating last few years where a lot of organizations have done some really interesting things and have risen up that, you know, I wouldn't have had anywhere close to the top. Like when we started doing this, you know, where would the Knicks have been, right? The first year we did this was 2019. I'm guessing we didn't have the Knicks very high.
No.
Or the Cavaliers. Like they're probably
Yeah.
both easily bottom 10, if not bottom 5
Yeah.
organizations for us at that time. All right, it is my turn to eliminate a team from the playoffs, and I fear the time has come for the Washington Wizards, John.
Yeah, you will get no argument from me, even though I've been there in person for half of their victories.
Have they won 4 games now?
No, they're
No,
at 2.
no, they've won 2. They still won 2. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, both of them against Atlanta, but one of them was at home. That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
I thought both those games were in Atlanta for a second. I had forgotten. Excuse me. What do you make of the Wizards? I mean, they are pathetically non-competitive right now.
Correct.
Even worse than I thought they would be.
I thought they would be exactly this bad, and have, yeah, they are. Jordan Poole's actually having a pretty decent year. Like, hasn't
But
been.
by his standards, still overpaid. But he's not, you know, the worst player in basketball anymore, like he was for the first half of last year.
Yeah. Yeah, you know who's sort of threatening to take that title from him is Kuzma, just jacking up whatever. I don't know what that dude is doing out there right now.
Yeah, the fact that they didn't trade him to Dallas when they had the chance, I mean, we'll see what they end up getting for him, if anything. But this whole like, oh, we're you don't want to go to Dallas? Sure, we'll keep you around. It's like, well,
There's
I guess
way that's what happened. Right?
No, you don't think so?
No, if they had a good enough offer, come on.
Well, okay, but I guess it was you know probably about the offer that it ended up being for like PJ Washington. You know, I would imagine. And that's, you know, maybe that's not an overwhelming offer. They were holding out for 2 picks, which, you know, was insane. Does it bother you that their first round draft pick center has a 43% true shooting right now? Is that an issue at all?
Yeah, I mean, Alex Sarr shows some signs, but he has no. He just as an inside scorer, he just doesn't give you that much. I mean, that was the whole rap on him, you know, coming into the draft. So I can't say any of that shocks me. You know, he's shown flashes in other phases of the game as a defender, as a guy who can grab and go with a rebound. You just his speed up and down the floor. But yeah, he's not going to score in the post.
Yeah, not a great finisher around the room either. I mean, I'm hopeful that his offense will get to pass, but like 20% usage is just way too much for him at this point. Like, I think he's going to be a quality defensive player. Like, he's just getting knocked around from a strength perspective. Like, I saw him in person about a week and a half ago in Washington, and like Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Darlin just like put him under the basket and
Yeah.
dominated him physically over and over again. Like, it is a little surprise to me actually that they are playing him exclusively at center the way they have, but
Yes.
they have kind of other guys they want to play on the wing as well. By the way, for people on YouTube who are watching who can see my face right now, it was looking at Kyle Kuzma with 29% usage and 49% true shooting, and also turning it over on 14.6% of his possession. I mean,
It's
that
been
is
rough.
fucking awful.
It's
Oh
been
my
rough.
god,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is. I mean, yeah. Like, why is anyone going to trade for him right now? Like, I mean, I guess he was hurt a little bit. I think he had a calf issue. He's only played 10
Yeah.
games, but like, yeah. Remember, it's always such a good contract. It's descending. Well, his play is
Yeah.
descending even faster than his contract is. So
Yes.
that could be a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. Bilal Coulibaly, good sign. He's had a
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
nice second year.
I mean, as much as they are just so fucking bad right now, I do appreciate that they ripped the Band-Aid off. And, I do like some of their prospects. Like, as soon as I sung Sar's praise, I was like, oh, maybe he could be rookie of the year. He just hasn't made a single shot since then. I really liked what he did in that Miami game in Mexico City. But he's 19. Like, he's the guy I would have taken there. I'm not going to give up on him yet. I think Bub Carrington has some hope as well. Like, just their whole organization had been so denuded that it's going to be a really, really long climb. But they'll have
Yeah.
another high lottery pick or two the next couple of years.
I would say so.
All right then. Well, let's pack it in for today. We'll finish up our organization rankings next week. That'll be a Dunked On Prime only episode, so please consider subscribing. And that will do it for today's Hollinger Duncan. We'll catch y'all next time.